Ladies and gentlemen, there's a moment in every relationship where comfort becomes dangerous, not the kind of comfort that feels safe and warm, but the kind that makes us lazy. The kind that convinces someone they don't have to grow because you'll always be there, no matter how little they give in return. And the moment you start evolving, when you stop begging, stop chasing, stop shrinking to fit their version of love, that comfort begins to slip away. That's when something powerful happens. You rise, and they start to regret everything they took for granted. Tonight, I want to talk to you about what happens when someone loses you not in an instant, but through every moment they refuse to grow with you. This is about the shift from comfort to clarity, and the weight of regret that follows. Let's talk about it. He didn't understand what he lost when you left. Not right away. At first, it felt manageable. He told himself this was just space, that it wasn't over, it was just a pause. He expected the texts to resume, the late night calls, the way you used to show up even after the worst fights, still choosing him, still trying. He thought you'd reach out, you always did, you always forgave, so he waited, but the days turned into weeks, and slowly it began to hit him you weren't coming back. Not this time. It starts subtly. A photo of you pops up in his memories, and there's no pain at first, just nostalgia. But then something shifts. He realizes he doesn't know where you are, who you're with, how you're feeling. That access is gone. That connection, once so easy, is now a wall, and the silence that once felt like relief starts to feel like punishment. He replays it all, not the big moments, the everyday ones, the way you laughed when you were tired, the way you gently called him out when he got too cold, the way you stayed even when he gave you every reason not to. He remembers how safe it felt to have someone who believed in him, not just supported, but believed. Someone who saw more than the mask he wore for the world, but he didn't protect it, he didn't nurture it, he took it for granted. In the moment, it was easy to brush it off, easy to tell himself you were emotional, that you'd come around, that love means always being forgiven. But the realization doesn't come with a loud bang. It comes slowly, almost cruelly, like water dripping through a crack in the ceiling, until one day it collapses entirely. He sees you online and you look happy, different, not in a showy way, not trying to prove anything, just lighter, at peace, and that's when the panic sets in. He's not just watching you move on, he's watching you evolve. Without him and that version of you, the one that's blooming now, she was always there. He just never made her feel safe enough to fully emerge. He thought you'd wait forever. He thought time was on his side. But the truth about time, it doesn't heal when someone keeps reopening the wound, and you stopped bleeding for him, you stopped reaching for closure, you stopped giving him one more chance, and so he spirals. He wonders if you're talking to someone new. He rereads old messages and hears them differently now. He sees the pain he missed, the patience he ignored, the warnings you gave, the moments where you were trying to hold it all together while he was busy pulling away. And then it dawns on him you were slipping through his fingers for a long time. He just didn't notice, or maybe he didn't want to notice, because if he noticed, he'd have to be accountable, he'd have to grow. He'd have to show up differently, but now it's too late, because you finally did the thing he never thought you'd do. You let go, not out of anger, not to punish him, but because you realized the one holding on was the one hurting the most. And now that you've stopped holding space for him, he's trapped in the space you left behind. The realization doesn't hit him when you're crying. It hits when you stop explaining, when your name no longer appears in his notifications, when your energy disappears completely, and suddenly he's not just lonely, he's grieving the woman who gave everything, grieving the life he could have built, grieving the version of himself he could have become. If only he had chosen to meet you there. But you waited, you gave chances, you loved deeply, and when it became clear he wasn't ready to hold what you had to give, You walked away with dignity, and now he's left with the truth, not the one he created to feel better, but the one that haunts him in the quiet. You were never the problem. You were the answer he wasn't ready for, and now he knows. But now you're gone. You were still there, still showing up, still texting good morning, still asking about his day, still lying beside him at night. But little by little you were disappearing, not in a dramatic way, not in a loud, attention-seeking way, quietly, silently. Your eyes didn't light up the same, your laughter didn't come as easily. You started hesitating before speaking. You started thinking twice before sharing how you felt, because you knew how the conversation would end. You knew he'd get defensive, dismissive, or cold. And eventually you just stopped saying it at all. But to him, it looked the same. You were still physically present. You were still posting photos with him. You still said, "I love you." So he thought everything was okay, or at least manageable. What he didn't realize was that the version of you he once knew had already started slipping away. He didn't see the moments where you cried in silence, the nights you stared at the ceiling, wondering how much more your heart could take, the countless internal conversations where you debated whether love was supposed to feel this lonely. He didn't hear those thoughts. You never said them out loud, because what's the point of repeating yourself when nothing changes? What's the point of trying to fix something with someone who doesn't even believe it's broken? So you stayed, but your spirit, your soul, had already begun detaching. Emotionally, you were making peace with a reality you didn't want to accept, that the person you loved wasn't capable of meeting you where you were, that you couldn't force depth from someone content with the surface, that you couldn't keep pouring from a cup that no one was helping you refill. So you distanced internally first. You still said, "I'm fine," but you weren't. You still showed up for the plans, but your heart wasn't in it. You still cared, but it was buried under disappointment. You weren't trying to hurt him. You were just trying to protect what little you had left of yourself. By the time you physically walked away, you had already grieved the relationship. The part people didn't see, the real heartbreak, happened long before the breakup. It happened in the moments you were still there, begging without words for something deeper, something real, something safe, and receiving silence in return. He didn't notice when your energy changed. He thought your quiet meant peace. He thought your stillness meant stability. He mistook your exhaustion for contentment, and so he stayed complacent. He stayed careless, but emotional disconnection is rarely sudden. It's a slow fade, a quiet erosion of something once beautiful. It happens in the absence of understanding, in the weight of unmet needs, in the moments when one person keeps reaching and the other keeps retreating. So by the time he asked what happened, it had already happened. You had already emotionally packed your bags, already withdrawn your hope, already convinced yourself that staying any longer would mean losing yourself completely. And that's the part people rarely talk about, that the actual act of leaving, the physical separation, it's just the final step, the final breath of a love that died long before it looked like it did. He may say you gave up too quickly, but he doesn't know how long you held on in silence, how many chances you gave that he never even saw, how much you shrank, adjusted, tolerated, hoping he'd wake up and fight for what you both could have built. But he didn't. So you stayed until staying became too loud to ignore, until you couldn't look at yourself in the mirror anymore without feeling like a stranger, until leaving felt like the only way to come back home to yourself. You didn't leave because you stopped loving him. You left because you finally started loving yourself more. And that love, the one you gave away so freely, is now being returned to the only person who never stopped deserving it, you. He'll remember you as the one who stayed when others would have walked, but by the time he realizes what that meant, you'll have already rebuilt a life where you no longer need to explain why you left, because you'll be too busy living a life that finally feels like home. At first, he felt relief. not because he didn't love you, but because he was addicted to comfort. Comfort in the way things were, even if they were unhealthy. Comfort in your predictable forgiveness, in your softness, in your staying. He convinced himself it was better this way, that maybe you weren't the right fit, that maybe you were asking for too much, needing too much, becoming too much. It was easier to believe that than to face what scared him most, growth. You were evolving. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started realizing that caring alone isn't enough to sustain something that refuses to grow with you. You were becoming more aware, more grounded, more aware of your worth, and that threatened the comfort he had built around your pain. Because comfort doesn't challenge us. Comfort doesn't force us to rise. It keeps us still. And the moment you began stepping into your own light, when you stopped over-explaining, stopped chasing, stopped waiting for him to meet you halfway, that's when the comfort began to break. It didn't happen all at once. He still felt in control, still believed he had time, still thought this was temporary, but slowly something changed. You weren't reacting the same. You weren't reaching out to fix things. You weren't holding up the emotional scaffolding of the relationship anymore. You weren't cruel. You weren't spiteful. You were just done, and nothing is more threatening to someone who's been comfortably stagnant than a person who no longer revolves around them. At first, he told himself that you were just in a phase, that you'd come back once the dust settled. But that version of you, the one who kept giving, kept bending, kept sacrificing, was gone. You didn't leave in anger. You left in clarity, and that's what made it so hard for him to process, because when someone walks away in rage, it's easier to dismiss them, but when they walk away in peace, in power, in complete emotional resolution, that's when regret begins to bloom. He didn't regret losing you right away. He regretted losing the version of you that once allowed him to stay comfortable. He regretted losing the woman who used to beg for crumbs. Because now you don't want crumbs, now you want the whole meal or nothing. He watches you evolve. He sees it in your tone, your posture, the way your presence no longer asks for permission, and it unnerves him, because it reminds him of everything he could have become, but chose not to. That's what evolution does. It forces those around us to confront the parts of themselves they've neglected. And for someone who never learned how to meet you on that level, it's easier to stay bitter than to accept that the relationship fell apart because he refused to rise with you. So the comfort he once felt in your presence, it starts to rot, because the woman who once offered it freely no longer feels responsible for his emotional safety. Now he sits with the silence, with the choices, with the realization that he was loved by someone rare, and he didn't recognize it until she stopped needing him too. Regret is quiet. It doesn't scream. It whispers in the moments where he sees your growth, your peace, your glow. It eats at him when he hears your name, when someone else mentions you, when he realizes someone else will get the version of you he was never willing to grow into. That version of you, she's not bitter, she's not broken, she's just done negotiating her value. He'll think about the way you used to look at him, the effort you gave, the emotional labor you carried. And he'll realize that love like yours doesn't come back around just because someone finally wakes up. Regret doesn't wait at the door. It shows up after it's been closed, locked, and rebuilt into something better. And by the time he truly feels what he lost, you'll have already become someone he no longer has access to, not out of revenge, but out of evolution. So, if you've ever been made to feel like your growth was a threat, if someone once found comfort in your silence, your sacrifice, your staying small, know this: you didn't lose them. They lost the chance to rise with you, because the moment you stopped settling, the moment you chose peace over patterns, you didn't just change the relationship, you changed you. And the version of you that no longer needs their approval, that version is the one who finally understands that regret doesn't belong to the one who grew it, belongs to the one who refused to. So keep evolving. Let their comfort become their lesson, because your peace was never meant to be someone else's permission to stay stagnant. Thank you.